April 18, 1942, 7:38 a.m. Tokyo time. Eastern Honshu, Japan. The air is unusually clear this morning. A fisherman on the coast squints toward the horizon, his hand shielding his eyes from the pale spring sun. The sea is calm, too calm. Somewhere far beyond what he can see, engines are already screaming at full throttle. High above him, far higher than any Japanese aircraft, should be silver shapes cut through the sky. You hear them before you understand them. A deep, unfamiliar growl. Not the sharp whine of a Zero, not the rhythmic beat of a Japanese bomber. This sound is heavier, throatier, foreign, and then the sirens begin. In Tokyo, shopkeepers freeze mid-motion. A streetcar grinds to a halt. Schoolchildren look up as air raid alarms, rare, almost theoretical, tear through the morning calm. People hesitate, some laugh nervously. Others don't move at all. This isn't supposed to happen. Japan is the fortress. The homeland is untouchable. That certainty shatters as the first bombs fall. Explosions bloom across factories, fuel depots, rail yards. Not massive, city-leveling detonations, but precise, deliberate strikes. Windows burst outward. Smoke curls upward between rooftops. Fires take hold in places never meant to burn. And above it all, American bombers B-25 Mitchells roar past at rooftop height. The unthinkable is happening. Just hours earlier, 650 miles out in the Pacific, the crew of Lieutenant Colonel James H. Doolittle had stood on the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. Dawn light bled into the sea as lookouts spotted a Japanese picket boat No. 23 Nidomaru, its radio already crackling with warnings. The mission clock accelerated instantly. Doolittle didn't hesitate. Launch immediately. The order meant one thing: everything would be harder now. The bombers were supposed to take off later, closer to Japan. Now they would fly farther than planned with barely enough fuel to survive. Barely. One by one, 16 B-25s lumbered toward the edge of the carrier deck. The crews knew the math. They didn't need to say it out loud. There would be no landing back on the ship. You could almost feel the deck tremble as Doolittle's aircraft surged forward, engines screaming against the wind. For a moment, just a heartbeat, it seemed like the bomber might slide straight into the Pacific. Then it lifted. Cheers erupted from the deck. Men waved their caps. Others stood silently, knowing they were watching something irreversible. 16 aircraft vanished toward Japan. No one on the Hornet knew if they would ever see them again. Now, over Tokyo, the Japanese military scrambles in confusion. Anti-aircraft crews rush to their guns, but many hesitate, stunned by what they're seeing. Enemy aircraft over the capital? That alone feels impossible. The guns fire late, sporadically, ineffectively. Japanese fighter pilots sprint to their planes, only to discover they're chasing shadows. The American bombers fly low, weaving between buildings, disappearing behind smoke and rooftops before interceptors can gain altitude. Inside one B-25, Captain Ted Lawson grips the controls as tracers streak past his cockpit. The aircraft shudders. Metal screams. Somewhere behind him, a crewman curses. But they keep flying. They drop their bombs and don't look back. This isn't about destruction. It never was. It's about a message. In less than an hour, it's over. The bombers scatter across Japan, Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya, Kobe, each crew following strict orders. Hit your target, then escape toward China. Behind them, smoke drifts upward like a question no one can answer. How did they get here? In Tokyo, military officials rush into emergency meetings. Phones ring nonstop. Reports contradict each other. Some insist the aircraft came from Alaska. Others claim submarines. A few whisper something unthinkable: aircraft carriers. The Japanese Navy had promised the Emperor absolute security. The Pacific Fleet was supposed to be crippled at Pearl Harbor. America was meant to be wounded, hesitant, defensive. But this is audacity, this is reach, this is proof. Out over the East China Sea, reality begins to close in on the American crews. Fuel gauges sink lower with every passing minute. Clouds roll in. Darkness approaches. China is still far ahead. Doolittle checks his instruments and does the calculation again. They won't make it. One by one, the bombers vanish into storms, into night, into unknown fates. Some crews will bail out over hostile territory. Some will crash into mountains or rice paddies. Some will be captured. Some will never be found. But that morning, none of them know any of that yet. What they know, what they feel, is that they have done something no one believed possible. They have touched the Japanese homeland. And far away, in the highest levels of Japan's military command, A realization is beginning to form, slow, cold, and terrifying. If America can do this now, what happens when they are truly ready to fight? The Pacific feels different after Midway. The ocean is the same color. The wind still cuts across the decks of ships with the same salt sting. But something intangible has shifted, something you can't chart on a map. For the first time, Japan is no longer advancing, it is reacting. In Tokyo, the official reports are carefully worded. Losses are described as heavy, but not catastrophic. Names of ships are withheld. Funerals are quiet. Photographs are censored, but inside the Imperial Navy, there is no confusion. 4 fleet carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu are gone. Along with them, hundreds of highly trained pilots and deck crews who cannot be replaced quickly. Japan's carrier arm, the sharp edge of its naval power, has been blunted in a single day. And the psychological damage cuts even deeper. The belief that Japan controls the tempo of the war has collapsed. This is no longer a campaign of carefully planned expansion. This is survival. Across the Pacific, American sailors absorbed the victory with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Many of them expected to die. Some had already written letters home they assumed would never be read. Instead, they are still alive. The headlines back home are cautious at first, naval victory in Pacific, but the truth spreads quickly. Midway isn't just a win. It's a reversal. And at the root of that reversal lies a realization that began with the Doolittle raid. Japan can be forced into mistakes. For American planners, the lesson is clear. Pressure works. When Japan feels threatened, it overextends. When it overextends, it becomes vulnerable. The war will be long, brutal, expensive, but it is now winnable. The ripple effects of April 18th continue outward. Japanese defenses tighten around the home islands. Resources are pulled back from the front lines to guard against future raids that may or may not come. Fighters are reassigned. Radar installations multiply. Every bomber sighted in the sky triggers alarms. The empire begins to look inward. America, by contrast, looks west. In Washington, industrial output accelerates to levels previously unimaginable. Shipyards work around the clock. Aircraft roll off assembly lines in numbers that defy belief. The lesson of the raid is embedded in every decision. Reach matters. Long-range bombers are refined. Carrier aviation becomes the backbone of strategy. The Pacific is no longer a barrier, it is a highway. Jimmy Doolittle, promoted to brigadier general, returns to duty. He doesn't speak often about the raid. When he does, he focuses on the men, not the moment. He knows the truth. The mission succeeded not because of what it destroyed, but because of what it revealed. Meanwhile, the surviving raiders recover from wounds both visible and invisible. Some return to combat. Others carry the weight of captivity, of lost friends, of Chinese civilians killed in retaliation. History will remember them as heroes. They remember themselves as airmen who followed orders and got lucky enough to come home. As 1942 gives way to 1943, the war grinds on Guadalcanal, the Solomons, New Guinea. Each island is paid for in blood. Each advance is measured in yards, not miles. But beneath the exhaustion, there is a current of confidence that did not exist before. Because America has learned something essential. Fear is a weapon. And on April 18th, it changed hands. In Japan, that fear never fully fades. Long after the fires in Tokyo are extinguished, long after Midway's wreckage sinks beneath the waves, the question lingers in the minds of planners and civilians alike. If America could reach us then, what will stop them later? The answer, though no one wants to say it aloud, is simple. Nothing. The Doolittle raid was small. 16 aircraft. Modest damage. But it shattered an illusion that Japan could never rebuild. The illusion of safety, the illusion of control. And from that moment forward, the war could only end one way. The Pacific, late May 1942, the ocean looks endless out here, an unbroken field of blue, stretching from horizon to horizon. Beneath that calm surface, both sides are preparing for something immense, something final. Warships steam in silence. Radios crackle with coded messages. Pilots pace the decks of aircraft carriers, running the same mental drills again and again. And behind it all, lingering like a bruise, is the memory of April 18th. For the Japanese Navy, the Doolittle raid has become more than an embarrassment. It is a wound to prestige, to doctrine, to identity. Officers speak of it quietly, but everyone feels its presence. The homeland was supposed to be sacred ground protected by distance, by vigilance, by destiny. Instead, American bombers appeared over Tokyo like ghosts. That humiliation must be erased. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto pushes his plan forward with urgency bordering on obsession. The objective is simple in theory. Draw out the remaining American aircraft carriers and destroy them in one overwhelming blow. Midway Island will be the bait. It is a tiny speck in the Pacific, barely more than an airstrip and a handful of buildings, but it sits astride Japan's defensive perimeter. Take Midway, Yamamoto believes, and America will be forced to respond. When it does, the Japanese combined fleet will be waiting. What Yamamoto does not know, what he cannot know, is that the Americans are already listening. At Pearl Harbor, in a cramped, airless basement, U.S. Navy cryptanalysts bend over stacks of paper. Sweat stains their collars. Coffee cups pile up. Among them is Commander Joseph Rushford, a man who looks more like a professor than a spymaster. For weeks, they've been piecing together fragments of Japanese naval codes. Call signs, fuel requests. Repeated references to a place identified only as AF. Rushford is convinced. AF is Midway, he says. Others aren't so sure, so they test it. Midway sends an unencrypted message reporting a breakdown in its water distillation plant. Days later, Japanese intercepts report that AF is short on water. The room goes quiet. The trap has been revealed. Across the Pacific, American carriers begin to move not as bait but as hunters. USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown badly damaged at the Coral Sea. Repaired in a frantic 72-hour effort that pushes dock workers to the brink of collapse. Yorktown should not be here, but she is. And that fact alone changes everything. For Japanese pilots, the coming battle feels like destiny. Many of them are veterans, elite, confident, deadly. They have dominated the skies for months. Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies. They believe in inevitability. They believe America's spirit was broken in December. They have not yet realized how wrong they are. June 4th, 1942. Early morning. Near Midway Atoll. The first Japanese aircraft lift off in waves, engines roaring into the dawn. They strike Midway hard-bombing runways, hangars, fuel dumps. The defenders suffer losses, but the island holds. Then comes the fatal hesitation. Japanese commanders debate their next move. Should they rearm for another strike on Midway? Or prepare for a naval engagement? That moment, those minutes, stretch dangerously long. Because while they hesitate, American aircraft are already inbound. U.S. torpedo squadrons arrive first. They fly low, slow, exposed. One by one, they are torn apart by Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire. Planes burst into flames. Pilots ditch into the sea. Entire squadrons vanish in minutes. From Torpedo Squadron 8, launched from USS Hornet, only one man survives. Ensign George Gay. He floats in the water, clinging to a cushion, watching the battle unfold around him. Above him, unseen by the Japanese, American dive bombers are circling, waiting. At 10:22 a.m., the sky breaks open. SBD dauntless dive bombers plunge out of the sun, screaming downward at impossible angles. Japanese decks, crowded with fueled armed aircraft, are caught in the worst possible moment. Bombs strike. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, firestorms erupt. Explosions chain together. Steel buckles. Fuel ignites. The pride of the Japanese carrier force is reduced to burning wreckage in minutes. A fourth carrier, Hiryu, will fight on briefly damaging Yorktown before meeting the same fate. By the end of the day, 4 Japanese fleet carriers lie at the bottom of the Pacific. Japan will never recover from this loss. And yet, none of this happens without April 18th, without the raid that shattered complacency, without the fear that pushed Yamamoto into a desperate gamble. The Doolittle raid didn't sink carriers. It forced a battle where carriers would be lost. As smoke drifts across the Pacific and survivors cling to wreckage, a new truth settles in. The war has turned. But the lesson Japan learns is the same one it should have learned over Tokyo. America is not fighting to scare you. America is fighting to finish this. Night falls unevenly over Japan. In Tokyo, fires still smolder as military police cordon off damaged districts. Civilians are ordered inside. Curtains are drawn. Radios whisper rumors that contradict official statements. The government insists the raid was minor, inconsequential. But no one who heard the engines believes that, because the engines came from the sea. And that changes everything. Inside the Imperial General Headquarters, the mood is brittle. Admirals and generals stand rigidly at attention as reports arrive in fragments, each one worse than the last. Enemy aircraft confirmed over multiple cities. Bombs dropped with accuracy. Pilots escaped. Escaped. That word lands heavily. For months, Japan's strategy has rested on a single belief. Distance equals safety. The Pacific is vast. America is far away. Its spirit is soft. Its people unprepared for sacrifice. But today, American aircraft flew 650 miles from the ocean, struck the heart of the empire, and vanished into the dark. Someone at the table finally says it out loud. If they can reach Tokyo now, they can reach anywhere later. No one argues. Far from those polished conference rooms, the consequences of the raid unfold in the shadows. Along China's eastern coast, villagers hear explosions in the night, not bombs, but aircraft tearing themselves apart against mountainsides. Parachutes blossom in the darkness. American airmen stumble into rice paddies, injured, disoriented, soaked to the bone. Chinese civilians hide them. They feed them, bandage them, lead them through back paths and mountain trails. Every act of kindness is an act of defiance. The Japanese response is swift and merciless. Entire villages are burned. Suspected helpers are executed. Tens of thousands of Chinese civilians will die in brutal reprisals, their punishment tied directly to the Americans who fell from the sky. This too becomes part of the raid's legacy. Not all the crews escape. 8 American airmen are captured. They are beaten, interrogated, starved, forced to stand for hours under the sun. 3 will be executed. 1 will die in captivity. The survivors will carry the memory for the rest of their lives, but none of that is known yet. Back in the United States, news breaks cautiously at first. The government releases a simple statement. American bombers have struck Japan. No details. No locations. The public reaction is immediate. Church bells ring. Newspapers sell out. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans feel something unfamiliar: hope. President Franklin D. Roosevelt smiles when asked where the planes came from. Shangri-La, he says. It's a joke, but it lands like a declaration. In Japan, humor is nowhere to be found. Naval planners tear apart maps of the Pacific. Carrier task forces are reassigned. Defensive perimeters are reconsidered. The idea of an invulnerable homeland is quietly discarded. The psychological damage far outweighs the physical destruction. Factories can be rebuilt. Fires extinguished. Certainty cannot. The raid exposes a flaw no one wants to admit. Japan cannot fight a long war of attrition against an industrial giant that can strike from across an ocean. And someone else is thinking about that flaw very carefully. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, understands exactly what this raid means. He had warned that Japan could run wild for 6 months, but no longer. The Doolittle raid arrives like a time stamp on that prophecy. Time is running out. Within weeks, Japanese strategy shifts. The focus turns eastward toward Midway Island. If America's carriers are the problem, then America's carriers must be destroyed. Completely. Midway is meant to be the trap. A decisive battle that will annihilate what remains of U.S. naval power and restore psychological dominance. The plan is bold, complex, risky, and it is born directly from the shock of April 18th. The Americans don't know it yet, but 16 bombers have nudged the war toward its most important turning point. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle believes he has failed. He assumes every crew has been lost, that the mission's cost outweighs its value. When he finally returns to American lines in China, gaunt and exhausted, he expects a court-martial. Instead, he receives the Medal of Honor. The irony isn't lost on him. The raid wasn't meant to win the war. It was meant to wake it up. Across the Pacific, 2 nations absorb the lesson differently. America realizes something crucial. Japan can bleed. Japan can be reached. The enemy is not invincible. Japan realizes something far more dangerous. America is not discouraged. It is only beginning. And as fleets begin moving silently toward Midway, as codebreakers race against time, as pilots train for a battle that will decide the balance of the Pacific, the echo of those engines over Tokyo still hasn't faded.